In May 1953, a teenager made it to the national headlines in Philippines. 17-year-old Clarita Villanueva believed that she was possessed, which resulted in a highly publicized exorcism that still questions the existence of demons and God. This is the exorcism of Clarita Villanueva. Clarita Villanueva was born in 1935, the youngest of 4 children and the only girl. She was raised in poverty by a single mother who made a living as a fortune teller and spiritist in Bacolod City in the Visayan province of Negros Occidental. Her mother was a spiritist and a fortune teller by vocation. The girl was brought up watching her mother holding seances, communicating with the dead, and using clairvoyance to predict to sinful people what they could expect in the future. Her mother took money from people for her services and then laughed at them behind their backs. To her, it was all just a game, a means of making a living by duping unsuspecting and gullible people. When World War II ended, Clarita's mother suddenly died, leaving her an orphan at only 12 years old and with no immediate family to take her in after being abandoned by her elder brothers. She fell into the hands of harlots, and at the tender age of 12 was selling her body as a prostitute. Clarita worked her way up from her island home to the capital city of Manila. The big city was a hiding place, a center of money and vice for her business. When Clarita was 17, she met a guy to elope with until she found out he was married, thus ending the relationship. Alone and jobless once again, she resorted to sex work to survive. At 18 years of age, Clarita Villanueva ended up becoming a vagabond, a person without a home or a job, who keeps traveling from one place to another. The local harlots became her teachers, and she learned the nightlife in the big capital city. But on May 6, 1953, she mistakenly offered her service to a plainclothes police officer and was incarcerated at the old Bilibid prison, as she was a minor and prostitution was illegal. The prison where she was incarcerated in was notoriously overcrowded, not to mention the actual tortures and deaths suffered by the inmates since the colonial era. And it is believed that it was her time in the prison that turned out to be hell for her. On the night of the second day, while every inmate were resting in their respective cells, Clarita suddenly screamed at the top of her lungs and then collapsed. Upon regaining consciousness, she claimed to have been attacked by 2 men who repeatedly bit her neck, back, arms, and legs. But this was impossible because she was detained in the women's division of the prison, and no jail guards were present during the incident except for her female cellmates. She described her attackers as evil-looking men clothed in black. One was a small cherubic figure about 2 to 3 feet in height, with snow-white hair and a large mustache. The other one was quite large, had 2 sharp fangs, and was covered in dark curly hair on his head, chest, and arms. 2 entities in Filipino folklore somewhat fit these descriptions, the Black Duende and the Capre. But this was just a start of the ordeal in the already messed up life of Clarita. According to Clarita, the 2 creatures tormented her every day, causing such a stir inside the prison. During these episodes, Clarita regularly convulsed and would helplessly cry in agony. In some moments, she appears to be in a state of trance and suddenly became violent, as if fighting invisible foes that only she could see. According to witnesses and jailers who came to her aid each time it happens, humanoid bite marks that were impossible to self-inflict started to materialize on her body. Throughout her ordeal, Clarita exhibited some truly bizarre behaviors. According to her cellmates, she drank from an empty cup when they refused to give her water. She also became intolerant of religious images and attempted to smash a holy statue displayed on a wall of her prison cell. She would laugh as if being tickled and shouted that the creatures would kill her. All this bizarre incidents caught the eye of the media, and soon the newspapers, radio, and magazine began to publicize it. What started as an inmate possibly acting out or going mad became a curious case of demonic possession that gained a substantial amount of media fanfare in both local and international scenes. The media dubbed the 2 described creatures as the Thing. The mayor of Manila at the time, Arsenio Lacson, worried this would portray Filipinos as mentally unwell and bring ridicule to the country as a whole. On the 18th of May, Clarita was brought to the city morgue for a psychological evaluation in front of a slew of reporters, medical professionals, the usual rubberneckers, and politicians. Just as expected, Clarita flew into a violent fit, declaring that the thing was biting her. Whilst holding her down, the mayor witnessed human teeth marks appearing on Clarita's neck and index finger. When she was asked to draw the entities, the pencil flew out of her hands, seemingly taken from her by an invisible force. The chief medical examiner, Dr. Mariano Lara, declared Clarita to be mentally sane and had her examined by different doctors, professors, and other medical specialists. Like the favored method of detecting a witch's guilt, she was pricked with pins by Lara while surrounded by 30 medical interns there to study her. Clarita was in a partially catatonic state but didn't appear to feel the stimuli when she was probed. She was asked to draw her attackers again, but instead ate the paper and chewed the pencil. Among the crowd of spectators were 2 doctors from the Insular Psychopathic Hospital. The psychiatrists concluded that Clarita suffered from hysterical psychoneurosis with symptoms similar to a typical demonic possession, such as dependency, sexual behavior disturbances, aggressiveness, and repression. Some doctors proposed that Clarita's malnutrition and dehydration caused her violent delusions. For others, she had epilepsy and bit herself while in a dissociative state. At the same time, further theories state that the bite marks could be psychosomatic, manifesting as a byproduct of her mental state. Because the experts couldn't agree on a single diagnosis, Clarita did not receive treatment and remained a curiosity for scientific studies. Some newspapers reported a total of over 100 people observed her, all utterly perplexed and at a loss to find a solution. Unconvinced of the diagnoses given, the mayor reached out to the rector of the University of Santo Tomas and the Archbishop of Manila, requesting an exorcism. When the Catholic prison chaplain, Dr. Benito Vargas, was called to observe Clarita, he was also unable to provide a verdict. 2 days before her psych eval, a certain doctor named Manuel Ramos came to interview her and was shown inside her prison cell by the chief warden, Captain Antonio Ganabi. When Ramos accused Clarita of faking the attacks to gain attention, Clarita stared at him with sinister eyes and told him in a low, growling voice, "You will die." True to her word, the seemingly perfectly healthy doctor died of a heart attack the following day. After the news of the doctor's passing, Ganabi stated that he was similarly cursed by Clarita. According to him, Clarita once asked him where the small metal crucifix that she normally wore was. When he said he didn't know, she then suggested checking his pockets. Turning them out, Ganabi was terrified to find the crucifix inside. Clarita smiled and warned him not to worry her like that, or else he would die. There are allegations that the Ganabi would sometimes kick Clarita while she was having epileptic fits out of frustration. Unlike the skeptical doctor, the jailer survived another day. But in a span of a few weeks, his health declined, and he eventually died like a wilted vegetable. This could all be interpreted as confirmation bias, but the question on everyone's mind was whether Clarita was just a victim of demonic possession, or if her inexplicable ability to utter deathly curses was a sign of her witchery. Upon hearing about the mysterious happenings on a radio station, an American Protestant minister and televangelist, widely regarded as the father of Christian television, named Lester Frank Sumrall, knew for certain that he had the answer to all of Clarita's woes. He was in the Philippines at the time and in the process of building a worship site for his congregation. In his mind, he is a godsend, the sole reluctant savior destined to save Clarita's soul. Through his highly connected Filipino architect and building contractor, he was introduced to the mayor to gain access to Clarita. The mayor agreed on the condition that he would not hold them responsible for anything bad that might happen to him. On the 19th of May, Sumrall met with Clarita, and when she first laid eyes on the pastor, she allegedly hurled insults at him, declaring her hatred toward God in English. But other eyewitnesses to this incident also claimed that Clarita only said, "I hate you." The confrontation further convinced the pastor that Clarita was indeed demonically possessed, since he was notified that she only speaks her mother tongue Tagalog and Ilonggo. With the evidence pointing towards a potential demonic possession, Sumrall decided that he would perform an exorcism on Clarita. Sumrall began by telling the authorities that no medication should be given to Clarita, and no other religious men should have access to pray for her, so that Jesus would get all the glory. He also prohibited the involvement of reporters during the exorcism. But after finding that they were largely sympathetic to his beliefs, he conceded. Since Clarita Villanueva was Catholic, like most Filipinos, someone gave her a rosary for protection days earlier. She would kiss and caress it each time she felt vulnerable and afraid. But due to his Protestant background, Sumrall had it removed, reasoning that the religious object was infested with evil spirits and that her actions demonstrate idolatrous beliefs. Assisted by 2 other Methodist ministers, Sumrall fasted to prepare himself for the spiritual battle ahead. They alternated between singing sacred songs and commanding the devils to depart in the name of Christ, while Clarita did the same by switching from being meek as a lamb and flying into a rage. While this was happening, fresh dental impressions reappeared on her flesh, too pronounced not to be noticed by anyone in the room. When Clarita said that the dark entities had gone out through the window, everyone thought it was over. But the so-called demons returned and supposedly spoke through Clarita that they had the right to live in her because she was unclean. The exorcism lasted for 3 days, during which the thing came and went several times. On the final night of the exorcism, Clarita seemed at peace and joined Sumrall in prayer. He also taught Clarita that she must resist their attack and tell the demons that they were not welcome if they decided to come back. After which, she was given food and was allowed to rest. After believing that the demons have fled from her body, she was once again sent back to the prison. But one night, as she was inside her cell, she asked a prison guard for a pocket knife to cut her nails with. But sharp instruments were prohibited as part of the prison regulations, so the jailer offered to do it for her. All of a sudden, Clarita let out a blood-curdling scream and said that she could see the thing standing right behind the man. She flailed her arms wildly, appearing to wrestle with her invisible attackers. Thinking clearly and having been present during the exorcism, the guard reminded Clarita of the pastor's advice. She did as she was told and then fainted. Authorities laid her on a table to be examined, and they found what appears to be coarse black hair about 2 inches long underneath her clenched fists and fingernails. Dr. Lara, who was already skeptical of Clarita's medical condition in favor of a more supernatural explanation, took a sample under a microscope and concluded that the hair wasn't human. He was also certain that it didn't belong to Clarita, despite the lack of proper genetic analysis which was not available in the Philippines until 1996. Clarita Villanueva became an unwilling target of the media spotlight, with sensationalist headlines calling her Dracula Girl. The public interest and media fervor in the case began to dampen when it was overshadowed by the coronation of the late Queen Elizabeth II a month later that same year. A week after her exorcism, Clarita attended her vagrancy hearing and was ordered by the judge to be sent to Welfareville, a home for the homeless and neglected children, to gain proper care, education, training, and occasionally correction. During her stay there, she ultimately achieved a sense of normalcy that seemed to evade her earlier in life. The demons finally fled and never returned. According to Sumrall, he petitioned Clarita to be released, and when she was ultimately granted parole, a Christian family who knew the pastor took her in. Clarita recovered well, but after some time, she left Manila to move to a small town in northern Luzon to escape the unwanted attention she continued to receive. Eventually, she moved back to her hometown in Bacolod to live in relative anonymity after marrying a rice farmer and having 2 children with him. In June of 1967, Clarita Villanueva reportedly appeared at the Nueva Ecija provincial capital to request assistance in recovering royalties from people who profited from her life story. Whether or not she also sued the man who claims to be her savior is not clear. Sumrall initially claims that he didn't ask for anything in return and was merely doing God's work, but later admits to requesting the mayor to let him preach at the vacant lot in front of the Manila City Hall for 6 weeks in exchange for his involvement in Clarita's cure. The mayor agreed and awarded him the construction permit to build his Manila Bethel temple, now called the Cathedral of Praise. While recounting his victory in front of a crowd of followers, Sumrall repeatedly called Clarita a demonized harlot.
In today's lesson, I wish to reveal to you a person that I knew very, very well, called Clarita Villanueva. Now, she had two entities bite her. I'd like to say that this phenomenon happened in a prison, a Bilibid prison, one of the world-famous prisons, over 300 years, used as a prison. Many people died in that prison. No doubt that prison is full of evil entities there. And while she was in prison for being a harlot, two entities bit her.
And compared her to the biblical figure Mary Magdalene. The story of Clarita Villanueva is consistently covered by many people through various forms of media. But the prime focus is usually on the supernatural demons, often ignoring the real demons that plagued Clarita all her life. She was an orphaned minor, forced into a life of self-degradation, her mental health scrutinized by media locusts, and taken advantage of by self-righteous powerful men. No matter how inadequately recorded, it is an interesting piece of history that many consider the first documented case of demonic possession in Asia.